Did I like The Boy and the Heron? I saw The Boy and the Heron with my local Japan club. One of the ladies who was there, dressed in full kimono for the pre-screening activity table, afterwards said, "I've always loved birds. They're so beautiful and majestic, but I don't think I can ever look at a bird the same way after today." Spoilers for anything I feel like talking about. First of all, the Japanese name for Hayao Miyazaki's new film, The Boy and the Heron, is actually Kimi tachi wa dou ikiru ka, or How do you live? It feels like a question to the audience. How will you all live? Especially since present/future tense is used here, which means the sentence can, if you want it to be, interpreted as a question about the here and now, or the future. I think if the name had been more directly translated, rather than renamed something straightforward and fairy tale-like, audiences would have been a little less surprised by the somewhat experimental movie they saw. The Secret Garden in the style of Ni no Kuni by way of 2001: A Space Odyssey. The foreign marketing teams might not have known how to market a film like this. Thus far, I've seen 3 distinct opinions of the film from people who really enjoy Studio Ghibli movies. It was a masterpiece of meaning, it was a trippy experience, or it was a garbled mess of a story. Which camp do I fall into? Let's back up, and let me say that I'm not here to do a full recap on a film I've only seen once. And I was not planning to write an opinion piece on this film. I very purposefully focused on seeing as little marketing for The Boy and the Heron as I could, and tried not to form any expectations at all. I wanted to see it and not analyze it, if possible. There are Ghibli movies, and it is pronounced Djibouti by the studio because Japanese pronunciation is pretty cut and dry, that I absolutely love, that I grew up with, that inspire me and fill me with wonder to this day. And there are others I saw once and may or may not return to again. I didn't want to assume this movie would be one or the other, so I watched no trailers and scrolled away from anything I came across. I walked into the theater knowing almost nothing, though I did see 2 images of the heron that gave me a clue about what I was in for. I saw the film a day before my husband, and I told him, "I won't tell you anything about the movie. You'll understand why. All I'll say is there are movies like Castle in the Sky, Spirited Away, and Howl's Moving Castle. And there are movies like Porco Rosso, The Cat Returns, and Tales from Earthsea. Expect to see something more along the lines of The Cat Returns than Howl's Moving Castle." Before anybody gets mad at me for putting Miyazaki movies in boxes, I just want to be clear that there is something beautiful and meaningful in all these films. But there are outliers when it comes to the storytelling and clarity of vision. The ones that make a little more sense, if you will, that have well-defined worlds where the rules are established and make sense, that are easier for mainstream audiences to appreciate. I'm not going to sit here and break down every single Ghibli movie with my feelings on them, unless the comments ask me to. But suffice to say that I think there is a reason why the popularity of certain films from the Studio Ghibli lineup are such juggernauts. Miyazaki has a knack for creating worlds that feel real. Spirited Away makes you feel swept away to the spirit world, as does My Neighbor Totoro, Howl's Moving Castle, Princess Mononoke, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Even though Arrietty isn't as grand of a story, I understand the universe. The characters in these films exist solidly in their respective environments, even if they are themselves fish out of water. These stories sit in the middle of the Ghibli spectrum. Far to the left, there are ones like From Up on Poppy Hill and Grave of the Fireflies that have very specific real-world settings that are quite enjoyable but lack talking cats. And far to the right, there are stories like Porco Rosso, The Cat Returns, and Ponyo that leave you with some pretty major questions about the mechanics of the world. Why did that guy turn into a pig? No idea, just speculation. And that's fine, they're fairy tales. But then you have something like The Wind Rises, which rides the line between reality and fantasy as the main character imagines meeting and talking with his idol in a world of airplane dreams. I believe Diana Wynne Jones, who wrote the original book Howl's Moving Castle, commented that Miyazaki's reimagining of her novel was beautiful, yet the Japanese director couldn't help but add so many of the war machines he loves so much. He took a story of pure fantasy and added machines, monsters, and warships. He seems to have almost done the reverse with The Wind Rises, writing a story about a man designing World War II fighter aircraft that eventually melts into a pretty standard love story. Why, then, do audiences adore Howl's Moving Castle, while The Wind Rises is considered mostly just fine? I think that's because of how the elements are woven together, and which story acted as the base. First and foremost, Howl's Moving Castle is about a ragtag group of characters who love each other, about Sophie becoming devoted to Howl, and vice versa, as spectacular things happen. I don't blame some people for not really jiving with the story or the character motivations, but I also love the fantasy and emotions playing out on screen. The Wind Rises, on the other hand, is the story of a man at work, swept away by his vision despite knowing that what he builds will be used for war and destruction. But the film doesn't finish its exploration of this point. Jiro, the protagonist, falls in love with a girl, and the production of airplanes becomes overridden by her presence, her illness, her passing. I think the point is that Jiro starts the film in love with flying and airplanes, but ends the film in love with a person. And love is the answer to war, right? The thing that really matters? And yet that message feels a bit hollow coming from Miyazaki, the master of overwork and artistic passion. It doesn't change the fact that Jiro designed the most famous airplane of World War II, the same war that ended with the firebombing of Tokyo and the 2 atomic bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that left a huge scar on the Japanese psyche. Their culture seems very preoccupied with the way war can feel like a natural disaster, and less interested in the truth of what their military did in China and so on. I like the point The Wind Rises wants to make, that Jiro is building planes not for the war effort, but for the men who have to fly them and survive. But it feels garbled when mixed in with the love story, especially since his wife doesn't feel particularly well-rounded. She's just a sweet artist. What does this have to do with The Boy and the Heron? Well, I'm trying to get at the fact that Miyazaki's movies tend to have a clear message. Oftentimes it's love, Ponyo, Wind Rises, Howl, Spirited Away. It can also be a love letter to nature and peace, Nausicca, Mononoke, Castle in the Sky, Totoro. It can be both, and more. And yet sometimes that message gets snagged along the way. Until now, that's more or less what I expected out of Studio Ghibli movies. Beautiful settings and a clear narrative. The Boy and the Heron is, in my opinion, different. It reminds me more of When Marnie Was There, which is not a Miyazaki film, but was produced by Studio Ghibli. It is a story that exists on the border between worlds, crossing aspects of time and dreams and personal fantasy. Spoiler alert here. Like Howl's Moving Castle, it was based on a British children's book, this one by Joan G. Robinson. It tells the story of Anna, a teenage girl who is sent to the countryside due to her asthma and behavioral issues, and she meets a mysterious girl called Marnie, who lives in a mansion. The girls form a friendship despite their differences. Anna deals with the fact that she does not believe her foster parents love her, that they only care for her since they are paid to do so, and Marnie is often neglected by her wealthy parents, left to the cruelty of the maids. Eventually, it is revealed that Marnie is a sort of ghost or afterimage of Anna's own grandmother. Anna's parents died, and Marnie cared for her until her death, at which point Anna was put in foster care, leading to the present-day situation. It's never clear exactly how the time paths were crossed, how Anna met and befriended her own grandmother as a child, yet the experience helps Anna make new friends and accept the love of her foster parents. In the same wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey way, The Boy and the Heron is about a boy named Mahito and his search for closure after the death of his mother in the midst of World War II. He is plagued by PTSD visions of his mother dying in the hospital fire, calling to him, asking him to save her. He is uncertain how to feel about his new family situation, since his father is about to marry his mother's younger sister, who is pregnant. They move out to the countryside, where there is a strange mansion in the woods behind the house, which is a lot like both When Marnie Was There and My Neighbor Totoro, in certain ways. I'd like to make a note here that I find it funny that this movie is coming out at the same time as Disney's Wish. I feel like all the visual references and callbacks that Disney was going for in that movie are much more present and effective in this one. The Boy and the Heron is full of scenes and settings reminiscent of past Studio Ghibli projects. The Gray Heron reminds me of Mr. Drippy from Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, with his big nose and somewhat untrustworthy habits. There are doors to different worlds you can get lost in, not unlike Howl's Moving Castle. Some people have one-to-one incarnations in other worlds, again, similar to the game, Ni no Kuni. The cute Wada Wada baby spirits are a lot like the tree spirits of Princess Mononoke, or the soot sprites of Spirited Away in Totoro. An old wizard akin to Fujimoto from Ponyo, a descendant who meets their deceased ancestor, like in When Marnie Was There. Scenes of open water, skies, cabins, kitchens, passageways, stairs, animals, anthropomorphic animals, strange creatures, grumpy old ladies, bumbling staff, men who are birds or birds who are men. I feel like I watched every Studio Ghibli movie in a day, then went to sleep and dreamed about it all. To me, The Boy and the Heron felt like watching a dream. That's the best way I can describe the experience. All the gaps in the plot are very much like how I dream. There are artifacts that have clear meaning, that indicate I might be working through something in the depths of my mind, and there are others that aren't so easy to understand, if indeed there is anything to really understand when your brain plays at night. Nostalgia Critic did a review about Where the Wild Things Are, and how that film really captures something about childhood play and dreams in the way that the monster characters don't mean just one thing. One monster isn't just a representation of the main character's mother. Another isn't just a manifestation of his anger. Their roles are more fluid than that. That's kind of how I feel about The Boy and the Heron. Yes, there are so many things I have questions about or could analyze to death, but in the end, I really enjoyed it only because it felt like Miyazaki putting a dream to paper. Does the Gray Heron work for the Grand Uncle or not? Or does his role in the story change the way dream characters shift without rhyme or reason? What is the meaning of the space rock? Why does the Keeper of the Crossroads Between Worlds need to stack wooden blocks? What is the point of bringing the pelicans and parakeets to this world if there is nothing for them to eat? Is this the afterlife, where the buried lie and recycled souls replenish themselves before going off to be reincarnated? The only things in this movie that felt really clear to me were Mahito's emotional struggles. And what are dreams for but to work through your troubles? He begins the story suffering from guilt over the loss of his mother. She died in a hospital fire, surely hoping her dear son would save her, at least in his mind. It makes sense that Himi, who appears to be Mahito's mother during the year she disappeared as a child, has pyrotechnic powers because it takes the worst thing Mahito knows about his mother, that she died in a fire, and turns it into her greatest strength. She tells him she loves him, that any price is worth getting to be his mother, that it's okay if he lives and she dies because she got to have that. Although admittedly the Crossroads world is collapsing around them, Himi still makes the joyous choice to leap through back to the world she came from in order to finish her life's mission. The nightmares of death and fire from the start of the film transform into visions of his mother's power and life. It reminds me of the shift in attitude towards fire in Avatar: The Last Airbender. In the end, my husband thought The Boy and the Heron was only okay. The plot holes ended up bothering him a lot, even though the visuals and ideas were neat. He actually prefers Satoshi Kon films over Hayao Miyazaki movies, and his favorite is Millennium Actress because its particular brand of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey storytelling is so fast-paced and integrated, with side characters literally getting swept away by the story, running to catch up with the leading lady's memories of her past. And I totally understand. I sort of think of Kon's work as a slightly more mature version of what Miyazaki creates. That's not to say Ghibli movies are childish. I just mean that Kon's work delved into more personal, modern topics like identity in a world of avatars, lies, TV, and long working days. It's very much about how the microcosm of our existence affects the macro world around us. And in this way, I think The Boy and the Heron gave me an experience more akin to Perfect Blue or Paprika than to Castle in the Sky or Howl's Moving Castle. It was very internal, personal. My main example of this is Natsuko. At the same time that he is dealing with his mother's death, Mahito is learning to appreciate the old maids at the house, like Kiriko, as well as accept that his mother's younger sister Natsuko will become his new mother figure. There's this whole thing about Natsuko also entering the mansion and staying in the Crossroads world, how no one is meant to enter where she lies pregnant. While on the surface it doesn't make much sense, since we don't know why the space rock doesn't like people going in there, or why all the other characters seem to understand this, in meaning it's pretty clear, or at least I have a clear opinion. Mahito wants to connect with this woman, wants them to care for each other because he is a young boy in need of parental figures, so he needs to go into the delivery room. His mother, embodied in the teenage Himi, helps him do this, though she is unable to enter herself. I mean, she is dead after all. She is not jealous or spiteful towards Natsuko for being engaged to the same man. She instead supports her future son in his endeavor to build a relationship with Natsuko. And when Mahito enters the room, he is met with harsh words, Natsuko going so far as to say she wishes he was never born. And what is more dreamlike than that, huh? Someone you feel anxious around tells you they hate you, that you're doing a bad job? At the beginning of the film, Natsuko seems to harbor no such emotions towards the boy, going out of her way to be kind and caring. Why this shift in behavior? Are these her true feelings, or is this Mahito's perception of her? It could be a bit of both. I'm sure Natsuko harbors doubts about the odd situation, now being engaged to her dead sister's husband and pregnant with his baby, so soon after the death. But she doesn't seem to have any ill will in regards to Mahito. But a child doesn't know where all those lines are. He can't be sure what Natsuko does or doesn't think when she's so put together and polished. My husband pointed out that Natsuko wanted to see Mahito early on in the runtime, when she's bedridden, then doesn't want to see him at all later when she's bedbound in the magical mansion. I will draw a comparison to Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue here. That film is all about identity, and how other people's expectations and perceptions of us can get out of control. It is also about how we can doubt our own identity, or build our own fantasies. I've seen some great analysis of the film that asks the question, can we figure out which scenes are in which version of main character Mima's reality? While I don't think Kon's intent was that we should be able to figure it out, since Mima can't, I think it's interesting to look at scenes from early on, when Mima is on the phone with her mother, while her life is relatively stable prior to more traumatic events. There are shots where Mima listens to her mother's nagging, and shots where she seems totally at ease having a nice conversation. Which is it? Is it both? Is Mima imagining the conversation she'd rather be having while being picked apart by her mother? In the same way, I think the wires of Mahito's real-world and dream-world perceptions of Natsuko are slightly crossed. He's worried that Natsuko doesn't want him at the house, that she wishes he was never born, that she doesn't want him present for the birth of his half-sibling. And it's hard to tell which, if any, of these things is true when he's a child thrust into a new family situation. Like in When Marnie Was There, Mahito has some proof that Natsuko might wish he weren't there. After all, she's pregnant with a replacement, just as Anna discovered that her foster parents were paid to keep her around and might not actually want her there. All three films are dedicated to one thing, finding peace in one's situation. Mima, in Perfect Blue, has to reclaim her identity, separate from what anybody else wants for her. Anna, in When Marnie Was There, needs closure regarding her past, to know where she came from, so she can accept who she is and be loved for it. And Mahito, in The Boy and the Heron, needs to reaffirm that he is his mother's son, that he always will be, but that he also has a life to lead and people to care for him. By the end, he has had one last hug from his mother, Okaa-san, and is calling Natsuko mom as well, Natsuko-ka-san. I want to finish up by drawing one more comparison. The Boy and the Heron, or How Will You Live, is an experimental film that touches something in my brain that is less like Spirited Away and more like certain short films I've seen, namely Puparia. Created by Shingo Tamagawa, Puparia is less than 3 minutes long and is made up of a series of beautifully illustrated clips. The opening credits play over a watercolor background that evokes something organic, microscopic, perhaps parasitic or dangerous, like the bodies of caterpillars. The name is Chrysalis Dream in Japanese, and lovely yet unsettling music plays, made up of percussive xylophone sounds. A girl sits in a lush garden amongst butterflies and discarded telephone pole parts alongside a cat-like beast with 2 tentacles on its back, something like a coral from The Voyage of the Space Beagle. She looks at the camera, then gets up and walks away. In a luxurious hall of wallpaper, carpets, and fancy decorations, a man seems to have gotten up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. He looks down the way through a dozen rooms, and from the dark depths of the house comes a floating pupa of a creature that gazes into his eyes as it flies nearer. A different girl stands in a forest of winding branches and points to the left. A person with mottled blue, yellow, and red skin looks out over a river of colors at dusk, standing on the wall of a dam near where a patch of spiked aloe plants grow, sprouting yellow flowers. The person's long, white hair blows in the breeze as they stand there with their canine companion, something like a maned wolf. They wear nothing but a fundoshi. There are lights and clouds, maybe smoke, in the distance beneath the stars. Looking back, the person sees a crowd of people. They all stare up at the person, dressed in everything from jackets and hats to fur coats and kimono. The colorful person's gaze is drawn back to the watercolor river painted with those same unnerving colors as the opening credits, and they look back at the camera to smile before turning away completely. The music continues, and the screen fades to black for the end credits. I love this short. I can't say I know exactly what it means, though I have my own interpretations based on my experiences. Maybe it's supposed to have a clear meaning, or the artist had a clear vision, but there is very little to go off of as a casual viewer. There is an interview with Archipel called 3 Minutes, 3 Years about the making of Puparia, but I will hold off on watching it since the exact meaning of the short isn't why I brought it up. I reference it because I like it for the same reason I liked The Boy and the Heron. It's truly dreamlike. See, to me, dreams are difficult to articulate because they happen in a part of the brain that is off limits to our waking minds. It can exist outside the realms of reason and reality because nothing there is real, only sparking neurons playing. There are many movies, even ones I love like Paprika, that don't feel truly dreamlike to me because my dreams aren't just jumbled messes of dolls, animals, and fairies. For me, dreams take place in buildings that are familiar yet wrong or different. They have stories that shift and change, featuring characters whose roles reverse or morph, in settings that are so fantastical it's hard to grasp why they were good or bad upon waking. Honestly, I don't know about other people. I just know about me. There are dreams I have where I can tell I was working through something, as Mahito does in the newest Miyazaki film. But more often than not, I am bombarded with stories that felt real and important, yet come out as silly, garbled, or plotless in the morning. When is an elephant an elephant? When does an elephant represent strength or unspoken words? When does an elephant simply join a parade because there was a procession in my dream? When does the elephant simply stop being in the dream because continuity isn't the point? After all that, let's answer the question: which camp do I fall into? Is The Boy and the Heron a masterpiece of meaning? Is it a mess of a plot that continually goes off the rails? Or is it nothing more than a child's dream? To me, it is a dream, and dreams are meaningful, and dreams fall apart under a microscope. I applaud Hayao Miyazaki for putting a dream on the big screen, regardless of whether anyone gets it, perhaps in the hopes that they do. And I hope other viewers get something out of it, whatever that means for them. So, until next time, bye-bye, Earthlings.